Let's do an NBA one before we get to a WWE one, because I mentioned this to you, casual.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I still not ready for this conversation. Oh man.
Uh,
Who want to go
Oh
first?
man. I'll let OG go.
you know what, man? I'm gonna just be real honest with you. I
Yes,
think
sir.
people forget how good PG was in Indiana. I think people have gotten amnesia about that because at one point it was Indiana versus Miami. You know, it was Indiana versus the Heatles.
Hmm.
So it was a two-man race in the East, and they were one of the best teams coming out of the East, and they just couldn't get past LeBron. So I think when it comes to Paul George, people are so caught up in what he did, what he didn't do in OKC, and what he's doing and what's going on now, and what he hasn't done in LA as far as the Clippers is concerned. But Indiana Pacers PG was no joke, man. He's no joke now, but Indiana Pacers Paul George PG 13 was no joke. And we have to give credit where credit is due. Jimmy Butler, um, that defensive stopper that he was in Chicago, not to mention, man, carrying that team a lot when Derrick Rose went down. He became the guy once Derrick Rose went down. And I'm pretty sure that the Philadelphia 76ers are missing him right about now. Because, hey, there's probably no doubt you probably have at least one championship there if you had him and Embiid.
Beat.
I would say at least one. I'm not gonna go too far and say they'd have had a dynasty. That's being kind of uh I'm trying to pick the words, not a mean word, but you know, that's kind of far fetched, I would say, to be nice. But if I have a choice, two-way player, uh, hey, Jimmy Butler. I'll go with Jimmy. I go
All
with
right.
Jimmy Butler. I mean, carry your team twice to the NBA Finals, put that team on your back, and just go in. I mean, and have one of the best NBA Finals performances against the great LeBron James that you've ever want to see. I mean, even
Facts.
though it's in the bubble, people always try to act like, well, that was in the bubble. You know, you still got to play basketball. It's still a basketball game. You still got to go out there and play. So for him to have a great performance to the point where he was just exhausted and almost passed out on the court, you're not going to get a finals battle like that from just anyone. And unfortunately, man, for PG, I got to take Jimmy Butler in this case, man.
Casual, go ahead.
And P, I want you to go. I'm gonna pop whatever answer you got, man, because it's tough. I'm going back and forth, man. Can you go PSP?
You going back and forth? All right,
And
all
I'm
right.
going back and
I
forth with
no,
myself,
no,
man.
I'll let you take your time.
Yes, thank
This
you.
is a tough. It's a tough one for me because PG. I think PG's the better perimeter shooter outside the perimeter shooter as far as with the three. Jimmy can hit the mid range, but so can PG. I think as far as attacking the basket between PG and Jimmy, I get the slight edge to Jimmy. Defense, both of them are great defenders. I probably get the slight edge to PG because of his length. Jimmy can lock down though because he got good size at 6'8", 230, 230, 235. Um, Number one option. Both of them have been to multiple conference finals. But Jimmy, I give him the edge. I just like the playmaking a little bit more. I just like what he's done as a number one option. He can still give you offense. He's good in the postseason, but good in the regular season, but in the postseason, different breed. He's just like a different breed. Paul George is the opposite. Even though at times Paul George, I will give him credit, particularly in the 2021 playoffs, he played really good. Particularly at times when Kawhi Leonard had to go down with the injury. And to your point, champ, and you, Damn it! Why you keep stealing? You keep reading my pages
I
or something.
apologize. My brain, my brain
Imagine,
goes a million miles
He
an
got
hour.
your
imagine.
he got your book, isn't he? He got your book,
He,
didn't he?
I was gonna because imagine how the Philadelphia Sixers would be with Jimmy buckets instead of Tobias Harris. No disrespect to Tobias Harris, he's a good player, but imagine if they had Jimmy Butler there. And with Jimmy Butler in Miami, and I hope Luis is listening, they're made for each other. Because even though Jimmy Butler with the outfits, the hair, the press conferences and stuff like that, he is
Yeah.
a no nonsense type of dude. Even though it's South Beach, because trust me, I know I'm from Miami. You can be distracted in Miami, but they are a blue collar organization. They don't play. Jimmy Butler fits that organization. He fits with Riley Spolstra. They all about competing, working their asses off, trying to compete for a championship. And I just love what Jimmy Butler brings to the table. And I think that the team gravitates to that. So that's why I give Jimmy Butler. If you want to make an argument for PG because of what he did in his prime years in Indiana before, unfortunately, the leg injury he suffered, I give you that. And what he did in OKC in 2018, Paul George, wasn't he a top 3 candidate for the MVP? When he was
2019. It was
yeah
19. It was
2000
yeah.
yeah
There
2019,
you go.
and considering, I just give it to Jimmy. That's all I got to say for it. Casual, what do you have, man?
Man. It's tough. It's tough. It's tough. It's tough.
You got to give me
The
credit for
oh,
making this one though.
yeah, no, I ain't gonna lie to you. This is probably the best one we've ever done. Cause it okay, the way that I'm looking at it, neither one of them, I believe, can be a number one on a championship level team. They can't be the best player on a championship level team. So now I'm looking at them as a number two. Because I think both of them have provide that. On one hand, Paul George shooting, like Paul George, like I don't know if people understand, but like over the last like 5 years, I believe. It's like, yeah, 1, 2, 3. The last 6 years, I'm sorry. The last 6 years, he had, aside from the year that I think he only played 30 games, he's never had a time where he's shot in under 37% from the 3 point line. Like he's that efficient, and it's on high volume. Like he's shooting like 8 threes a game during that time. And so, like, he provides the floor spacing along with the extra ball handler. His playmaking has continued to progress to be at least above average. I think as a rebounder, I think he's a solid rebounder. I don't think he's great. I think defensively, like contrary to what people believe as far as his reputation, he has not been the defender that he was in Pacer years, which I don't expect him to be. When you go into teams that ask you to be more of a offensive focal point, that typically happens. It happened with Kawhi Leonard, happens with LeBron, happened with Kobe. Like anytime you're in a situation where you have more responsibility, something has to teeter off for you to have that happy balance. And so I think that's the way it goes. In Jimmy's case, Jimmy is a much better slasher. He puts rim pressure like far more frequent than Paul George. I think he also, in his own right, does not get the proper respect that he deserves for his playmaking prowess. He's a very respectable playmaker. He's a solid rebounder. I think defensively, he is the better defender than Paul George just because of consistency. But I do want to throw this tidbit out here. A lot of why this conversation is even being had is because Jimmy has something that Paul George has never had the ability outside of his younger days in Indiana. Jimmy Butler has Eric Spoelstra and his philosophy and his system built around. So Jimmy Butler, that I know, Jimmy Butler is never looked at to be, a star. He's typically looked at to be, Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler gives you 20 points. That sounds about right. So when he actually drops 30 or 40 or 50 on my Bucks, it's a celebration because nobody expected him to do that, right? But then when he goes back and he has his little 13, 14 points games, you just be like, oh, okay, that's just Jimmy. You just leave it about. in Paul George's case, Paul George gets slandered, I think, far too frequently for my liking, large part due to him playing on teams to where he is like the secondary focal point of an offense, and the offense is heavily relying on him. If you look at him in OKC after Westbrook, who was the offense relying on? PSP.
Paul George.
OG, when he went to the Clippers, before they got James Harden, who was the secondary? Who, like, as far as aside from Kawhi Leonard, who was the offense heavily relying on?
PG-13.
And so, in the case of, and I'll ask you both, and for the Miami Heat, if Jimmy Butler doesn't show up offensively, is it going to hurt the Miami Heat's chances of winning a game?
No, because they have a system in place.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And so when it comes to Paul George, I think that's the difference. I think a lot of this is Jimmy's success, but Jimmy's success isn't heavily reliant on him performing. It's heavily reliant on his team, his unit performing collectively. And that's not a knock to Jimmy. That's more just like that. Like, again, with the Stockton situation, this is perspective. Like, you put context to it. And so for that reason, I'm actually going to ride with Paul George, because I think Paul George, floor spacing, extra ball handling, playmaking ability, rebounding, and potentially, not consistently, but potentially his All-NBA defensive ability, I think that I weigh that a little more than Jimmy Butler's.
All right, that's fair.
Casual, real quick.
Yes, sir.
Do you think if they would have bought Lance Stevenson back when he was in Indiana, after they made it to the conference finals but didn't beat LeBron, do you think they would have had a chance to run it back again against Cleveland?
Hell no. Hell no, dude. No. Because Lance Stevenson wasn't the problem. The problem was they didn't have a true number one. Like, they had a collective unit that, really, to tell you the truth, David West started to decline. Once Roy Hibbert, I don't know what happened to Roy Hibbert mentally, but Roy Hibbert just flipped his
There were
switch, and he
times
just,
in which he was scoreless.
exactly. And then in Lance Stevenson's case, Lance Stevenson was a person that wanted to be a one, but he didn't have the skill set to be a one. And Paul George he lacked the aggressiveness or the assertiveness to, sort of stamp his flag as the true number one. And so I think that even that Indiana Pacers team, if they go up against the Cleveland Cavaliers, LeBron and Kyrie Irving, they're just too poised offensively for Indiana to stop them. And defensively, I don't think Cleveland has to work that hard, because I never felt like Indiana's offense was a true offense. I think it was more of a streaky offense. If they get hot, you're in trouble, but very seldomly do they win games based off of their offensive production alone.
Right. Okay, then. I just wanted a second opinion because I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
That's all good.